Yeah, so we have a short agenda. I would say it takes approximately 30 minutes. We'll give you an overview of the software. We'll walk through the obligation that different type of funds have. We'll show you the template that we have created to make reporting easier, and walk through our software. And finally, as Max has said, there's room for questions and answers. So let's start with how does it actually work? So the way we set it up, we defined a Excel template which allows you to set up one manager with all their funds in one setup. So if you're managing 10 funds, all you fill in is this one template, and you can create both the report for the manager as well as for the funds. The template will, and we will show you how to fill it in, but the template will guide you through the questions that ESMA has defined. And once you've filled it in, you then import it into our application. Then we apply 1,000 plus validation rules. We show you any inconsistencies, if there are any, or incorrect things that are incorrect. As a next step, you will be able to view the report, and finally you'll be able to generate the computer files, so the XML files that you need to upload to the regulator. Before we go into the working of the template, we want to briefly discuss the reporting obligation under the ESMA rules, because there is a big distinction between the type of manager you are. And there are a number of criteria that determine how often and what you have to report. And the main criteria is whether you are a registered manager, or in the Netherlands they call it a light manager, or an authorized manager. So that's a big distinction. And if you are an authorized manager, then there's other criteria that also influence the content and the frequency. So depending on how many assets you have, whether you have leverage, or if you're a private equity company, if you have control in other companies, you might have a more extended reporting obligation. So how does this work? A light manager always reports annually. Authorized managers, depending on the criteria just mentioned, report quarterly, half yearly, or yearly. And then there's also the content of the report. So there's a manager report and there's a fund report. The manager report is the same for both, but there's also a distinction in the content between a light manager and an authorized manager. So a light manager only has to answer the first 120 questions. And a authorized manager, depending on the situation, they have to also answer, which is called section 24.2, and 24.4 might also have apply. Then related to this reporting obligation, and the reason why we point this out is because there are codes in the report that you have to set correctly. And those codes are also important for our software, because we use those to check whether your information is complete. And so that's why it's important to set these correctly. So there's a code, it's called field 5 for the manager. And there you can either be an authorized, registered, or a third country fund, manager. And there's also the reporting obligation for the fund. And you have these 5 categories. And here again is the light category. So it's in the template that we provide, we by default set these up for a light fund, so that it caters for most of our clients. Then about the template. So when we designed our application, we looked at the report in its entirety. We grouped questions that are related, and we will show that in the template. And we have chosen to calculate whatever is possible based on as little data as possible. So, for example, in the report there are lots of different rankings. We've chosen to, rather than you filling in the rankings, we ask for your position, so your investments, so that we can calculate all those rankings, and also we can then aggregate the information at the manager level, so that you don't have to populate that either. So this is a little slide on the structure of the template. So in the template, you can set up one manager, and you can report into multiple jurisdictions if needed. So if you're reporting in the Netherlands, you only fill in one jurisdiction. If you are a third country manager, you might have a reporting obligation in multiple countries. You would then attach multiple jurisdictions to your fund, to your manager. Same for the funds. And yeah, you can set up as many funds as you want in the template. You can just expand it. And to each fund, there are properties that apply. So for example, a fund has an investment, we call that a position. A fund can have share classes or not. And then you attach those two and fill in the questions related to that. So we've built it up by elements in the template. Then we step into the template itself. So let's see. So these templates, we have a template that's set up that can both cater light funds and also authorized funds. And it's highlighted very clearly where the obligation to fill it, or where the questions end for the light funds. The template is always something you can download in our application. There are links in there, and I'll show you later. And we always make sure that the latest template is available. What's important is that you see a number of bars here, or lines. So we start out with questions about the manager, and the numbers and names, they correspond with the names and numbers as used by the ESMA. And they, if sometimes there's a lot of how do you say, documentation about a particular field, you can always refer to these numbers and try to find information. But we have chosen to integrate as much as possible into these templates. So for example, if we look here, this is the reporting code that we just showed a few slides before. You'll see a 2. So a 2 is actually a light fund. So that's for example how you can. So in here you will also see that this field is mandatory. There's an explanation, and that's how it's set up. So for each field that is explained how it should be populated. And you also see lots of fields that are not populated. So those are optional, and it's explained in which case you have to populate them. So at the end, if you look, we only ask for a few fields about the manager. So like the legal name. If you have a like code, you have to fill it in and things like that. So you don't see any numbers because we calculate those based on the data you fill in with the fund. Then, as shown in the previous slides, you can attach one or more jurisdictions to a manager. So in this example, the manager has received this number from the regulator, is reporting to the Netherlands, but you could just add a second country to here and have another ID attached as well. So I'm gonna remove this, but so assumptions is something most clients don't use. And then we start here with the questions related to the funds. So in this case, the manager is a real estate manager, and they are managing 2 funds: a residential real estate fund and a commercial real estate fund. Again, they are set up as a light registration. We ask a few more things about the manager. For example, in the template you will see things like how many assets are you managing. So this is what are your assets under management, what is your net asset value, and we also ask things about how much percentage of retail investors are in your fund. So So if we continue, then so this sets up the fund. If we would add a third fund, it's as simple as just copying and start modifying the name. So you would call this maybe Fund 3, and then you would just modify what needs to be changed. So that's likely the name and the dates at which the fund was created, and then you would just walk down the template and apply information to that third fund. So the first section is again the codes that are used by the regulators. I'm going to remove this because otherwise it will fail when I upload it. Then there are again the assumptions that pretty much no one uses. If a fund would have share classes, and in this case it doesn't, it would be as simple as saying, okay, I have a fund with share classes. What's the fund's name? Residential fund. And I start to populate all the values. So the code that you've received, if there's an ISIN, you fill it in. Maybe the name of the share class is mandatory. So it will state on each field whether it's required or not. And if you don't have share classes, you just leave it empty. So similarly, they ask questions about the master-feeder relationship, which is also something that that some funds, when they invest in another investment fund, have to list. Prime broker is something that is mainly applicable to hedge funds. Then
Olaf, sorry to interrupt you in your story. I got a good question here. Maybe you can answer it in between.
okay.
How many funds can we actually report in a template? Is there like a maximum limit?
No. So we have clients who report 300 funds, but I would say this is the way it's currently set up. Is it works well for maybe 20, 25 funds, but all the information here can also be set up in separate tabs. For example, so you could choose to um, to have all your positions, which we come on later, set them in a separate tab. Or you can just add rows. So if you run out of space, you can just create more room here and start adding more funds. So it's as simple as that. But for clients who have 300, then we advise them to discuss it with us how to best set it up. But we have many options there. So you can either create additional tabs and set your different funds in there, or maybe you have particular information like positions that come directly from your fund accounting system, and those can be combined with other pieces of information. So we've made it kind of modular on how you set it up, but there's no limit.
Very interesting. And then I have one more follow-up question regarding the same topic. Do you split the funds over different templates, or do you put them all in one template?
So
Can we split funds
yeah,
over?
you can split them up into different templates. You could, so some clients, they have one template for each fund, and then when they have to report the manager, you just load all those templates together into the system, and it's then able to calculate the numbers for the manager. So that's also a way to set it up. But I would say, yeah, that we should. It's best that we discuss how you operate as a company, briefly discuss that, and then advise you on how to set it up. But it's definitely technically possible, and we do it for multiple clients.
Thanks for taking this question. I hope that answers the question. Yeah, please continue.
Okay. Yeah, so we were here at the FX rates. So FX rates are only relevant if you're investing in non-euro investments. Um, we by default each quarter we load all the ECB rates into our system. So most clients, they don't need to use it, but you can either add your own FX rates or add maybe FX rates for a particular date. That's possible. Um, for a light fund, you also have to, and for each fund, you have to fill in your strategy. So in this case, we have these two funds, so the residential and commercial real estate. So that's how do you say? That's the main strategy for the fund, or that's the one strategy for each of the funds. Um, And then we come to the last bit, and this is about the investments of the fund, but also the liabilities. So sorry about the dog here. So a residential real estate fund in this case has four, how do you say it? Four investments. It has cash, and also it has 3 homes that it invested in. For these 4 investments, we ask a number of things. So this is depending on the asset class, the type of instrument you're investing, you have to fill in different fields. So these are non-exchange investments. So this would also be similar if you do private equity. But if you're investing if you're a hedge fund and you may be investing into listed securities, you have to start filling in ISIN codes and markets and so on. And if you have derivatives, there are lots of fields that they ask about that as well. But in this case, you don't have to fill in a lot. So you basically say, I have 4 positions, they're all long, and this is how much they are worth, the net asset value, and this is basically the exposure, which for most investments is the same. These columns start to differ for derivatives, but also for real estate when it's mortgaged or not. You can also have a situation where you have loans, so that's in this case, then you have a negative value. And then finally, we have questions about the currency and the region. So for a lot of the clients, it's just euro, and you're investing into the euro region. But again, there are lots of codes that you can choose from, and all these things are in drop downs, so that should make it easy to choose. One thing to say about this is that you have to classify each of your investments with a so-called sub-asset class type. So in this case, you see here it's physical residential real estate. And here there's, commercial real estate. These codes, we have them in the drop-down, but due to the limitations of Excel, we cannot give you all the comments. So then we refer to an annex, which is also added in the documentation. So we've included all the reference tables in here as well. So if you go to this particular reference table, you should find the best fit to classify your assets. And there are many codes to choose from, also for private equity and real estate and so on. In this template, we also have lots of other tables. So, for example, the reporting code, there are many of them. If you're registered, it's simple. It's this top line. If you're an authorized fund, you really have to look and find the best fit for your company. Similar, we also have a diagram which should help you in determining and this is basically an ESMA diagram, which tells you based on the criteria that I showed earlier, which reporting obligation your fund has. So does it exceed a particular threshold and so on. Going back to the template, so this covers the different elements. If you go further down, you will see a line that basically states this is the end of the light funds. But the template goes on quite a bit, and I think for this kind of session, we cannot go through each of the individual questions there, but there are many more that can be applicable to your fund. The good thing about our application is that once you've set these codes, reporting, so you've filled in the correct reporting obligation, we will then verify whether you have filled in, enough information to report, or whether you may be missing something. It will be highlighted. So this is the data. And this data is now going to be used for loading it into the application. So I'm going to show that to you. So let me see. So this is our website. You log on, you sign in with your password, and now you're going to import your Excel. And this is also touching on the question that that was raised. So you could also have that you import multiple files. So depending on how it's going to be set up. But in this case, all information is in one template, and it's now imported. And at this moment, the application applies all of its validations, and it either gives you a thumb up or it gives you something red. So in this case, it's all fine. I'll also show you if it's not fine. We have an error situation here. Yeah, in this case, you start to see errors and warnings. So one of the things we check is whether the positions you've listed in your basically your balance sheet add up to the values that you've given at the fund level. So you say your fund has a NAV of 4 million. If your positions have a completely different value, you will see the difference here in percentage and amount. But this is a warning because there's always reasons why you maybe don't fill in some of the things like receivables and payables that can cause small differences to these amounts. But it will also check. It will also have hard type of errors. And this is one of examples. So in this case, you're reporting for year 2019, but you filled in a date that's outside of that range. So that's quite a simple error. We have also other ones like this one. You filled in a net asset value that is, how do you say it? That is higher than the assets under management. Well, that's not, according to the rules, that's not allowed. So that's also a check we do. And there are many of these checks, either on field level, on combined fields. So we check fields against each other. And there are very complicated checks between codes and other things you filled in to make sure that the report is as consistent as possible there. I'm now going to load the correct version again. So we have a thumbs up, no issues, no errors. It doesn't show you the data. If you want to, you can still see what you've loaded into the system. So you just, by default, it doesn't show you. So this is the raw data. And now you go to the second tab, is to review the report. And in this case, we've loaded in 2 funds, so you will see 1 out of 2. If you have 20, you will see 1 out of 20, and so on. And you can then step through the different funds with this button. So here you see residential real estate, here you see commercial real estate, and you see 1 tab here at this moment. If you're an authorized fund, you will see also a 24.2 or a 24.4 with the remaining questions that can be applicable. So these are the exact questions as defined by the ESMA. It gives the information you filled in. It also gives the explanation of, in this case, what code 3 means. So you're going to report 3, but to verify that you have filled it in correctly, it provides you with additional information. The first parts are just things you filled in the template. So when was the fund incepted? What's the name? What's the codes that you received from the regulator? If you have share classes, that's shown. If you're master feeder, it's there. Prime broker. Then you start to get the amounts. So this is at the top level. So how much is the fund worth? How many assets is it managing? What is the NAV of the fund? Things like about the strategy. So in this case, it's commercial real estate fund. If you're private equity, you end up somewhere here. So depending on the type of fund, this should be correct. And this is something we always say, you must check this very accurately because this is exactly what you're going to report to the regulator. And then you get to the part where we calculate. So in the example we provide, we've not filled in too many positions, so it's quite a simple ranking. But this is automatically done on the size of the most important instruments. the geographical spread by 2 different values, your biggest asset classes, and this is also in relationship to the market. So those numbers you do not have to think about once you filled in your positions correctly. And finally, you have the part where you fill in some information about your investors. So this is all about the funds. If you have many funds, we also have the ability to step through it here or search for them. Most clients, if you have 10, it's quite clear. But if you have 300, then of course you want to search funds. Then you also see a tab AIFM, so that's the manager. So this is the manager report, which is now also shown. Similar structure, but far fewer questions, and it basically rolls up the information from the underlying fund. So it shows the markets, but then at the level of, in this case, the sum of 2 funds. But if you have 20 funds, it will sum up the 20 funds. Asset classes, the same thing. Things like assets under management. So none of the values you have to fill in yourself. These things can also be printed as PDF, and you can then use that as an audit trail. And then finally, if you have checked it, it's all looking fine, you can then report it to the regulator. That's different for everybody. So if you're from the UK, you will see the UK here. And if you are in a multi-jurisdiction party, then you will see multiple countries here. For which you can generate the files, and we will generate the files in local format. So there can be small differences between each of the countries, in both in the XML as well in the way that they name the files and whether they need zipping or rules like that. We try to accommodate that as much as possible in the app. So, but this is an example of the Netherlands. So we have a manager that's called this, has this number, and it has 2 funds. So we're going to generate the manager report. It's now been generated, and we're going to generate the fund reports, which have now also been created. And if we open the zip file, in this case in the Netherlands, you have to load each individual fund to the regulator. If you're in the UK, for example, it will generate one file with all funds. So that's really, there are local differences there. But this is basically the XML, so you can just see the structure. And so our whole setup is that we, of course, generate correct XML, but also that we do all the checks in the application to make sure that once you upload this file to your local regulator, it should not fail. If it does, then we add, and that happens occasionally, that there's a new rule with the regulator. We will then add the logic to the application. So this covers the demo. I forgot one more thing. So if you look here, so this is about the report. As stated, we load in all the ECB rates. We also have a help section. In here we have a recording of a previous webinar. So if you want to, how do you say it, look at how it should be done, the reporting, you can look at that. We have the guide, and we also always make sure that we have the latest template to download. Of course, if you have questions, you can always contact us and call us. We're usually able to answer questions quite quickly, and sometimes we have to dive into a topic as well, and we always make sure we come back to you.